there, and welcome back to part 2 of our video we are making of Stargazer Lily in a carnival glass vase. Before we get started, I thought I would share my palette with you of colors that are available to me during this painting. So let's do that. Get rid of me. Get rid of all this stuff. Okay. So, this is the palette I've been carrying around for a while to my classes and using in the studio. I got it when I started painting with Daniel Smith colors a few months ago. I like it. I like the colors on it. I made a really corny decision. I followed the order of the colors that came in the box that were listed on the side of the box rather than doing chromatically from, you know, across the rainbow from the yellows to the reds to the blues. And I normally set up my palettes this way. So I'm going to continue to use this one and paint this one down, but eventually I'll be switching. I got a new palette for Christmas, the same one. It's a Holbein, a little bit larger. The wells go on both sides. And I'm going to pick and choose what colors to put. So there will be mostly Daniel Smith. There's going to be a couple of core colors and a couple of Cheap Joe's colors in there, the American Journey ones. But on my palette right now are Yellow Ochre, Neutral Tint, Burnt Sienna, Cadmium Yellow Medium, Cobalt Blue, Cobalt Teal, Diox Purple, Jadeite Green, Cadmium Yellow Medium, Cadmium Red Medium, Ultramarine Blue. Here I put Opera. I kind of swapped it out for my Alizarin Crimson. I need both, which is one of the reasons why I need the bigger palette. Convenience color, I have Lavender, which is really just the Alizarin Crimson, Cobalt Blue, and a little bit of white gouache. But sometimes it's nice to have it so I don't have to spend time mixing it up. And I have some white gouache. Sometimes you need to take a color down a little lighter, and sometimes the transparent mix just won't do the trick. So I do that sometimes. As you can see, I keep a little spray bottle. This is a nice mister. And that keeps me ready to go. So I'm going to switch out that. I may switch back to this when I am making some color mixes. Here's our painting from where we got last time. My philosophy is generally always the same, whether I'm working really loose or in a more structured painting like this one. It is to block in light colors the main shapes of the painting. So I put in the vase, I put in the shadows, I put in the yellow greens, which are the lightest bits of all these dark greens that push everything forward. I put in some of the pinks for the flowers. That gets me to a point, and that was about an hour's worth of painting, maybe if I wasn't talking at the same time. So that gets me to a point where I can decide what happens next, what I want to focus on. One thing from the original photograph, which is here, the original photograph, the carnival glass vase has a lot more going on in it, in that it's darker, it's got reds and blues. I like my carnival glass to be more amber, so I just kind of shifted it around to ambers and reds and oranges rather than this blue and pink that's going on in that one. So just a heads up, I did that. We have our painting. The first one I did here is a reference. I'm not trying to be exact, but for purposes of the painting, it is nice to have it and to see it and to remind me of some things. In our original drawing, I did put the stems in here, not stems, the pistil. Anyway, this part, and I did it here, but I don't have it in this painting. It's dark. It goes on last after I get this pink and yellow part in here, so it's not a big deal. What to do next? I think I'm going to focus on the vase for a little while and start to darken up these greens. That may be as far as we get with today's painting. I want to keep the video to about a half an hour. I learned something important the other day too in our last video. I wanted to get it right up to you, and it turned out that I have AT&T fiber internet, and even with an unlimited plan, apparently they filter for uploading video content and deprioritize it. So it took that video, which was about 5 gigs worth of video, took about 12 hours to upload to YouTube. I felt like I was living in 1999. So I have to take that into consideration. So I want to get a chunk of video done, maybe a half hour today, and I'll get that edited and start the upload process tonight so that you guys can have it tomorrow, which would be on Thursday the 27th. So let's get going. You know, you don't want to hear me talk all day, you want to paint. I'm going to put a little bit more light on in here. There we go. I can see my board a little better. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's see. We need an orangey color. And for that, I will say I do love these Daniel Smith paints, but I find they do not wake up from being dry as nicely as, say, the American Journey from Cheap Joe or the QOR, the core paints. I don't know why, just how they're made. So I definitely have to wet them a couple of times to get them to not be cranky. And so the mix I've made is some opera, some cadmium yellow. I'm going to get some water in there and keep it transparent. Get some more yellow ochre in there. Some more cadmium yellow in there. Alright, so that's a pretty nice orangey golden color. I think that's pretty good. The other color I want to make sure I have ready is, when I'm using oranges, I like to have some purple mixed up as a mixing color. It can darken the color quite easily, and it can help complement it. Helps give it some variety. And then up here I'm just going to have some opera or hot pink, whatever I happen to have on the palette, ready to go. Those are the 3 colors that I think I'm going to use in the vase. So there's purple and orange in there. There's a lot of, let me switch back now. There's a lot of green up in the top of this painting, and in the pinks we'll have some purples. This is a very typical color palette for me to work in the subtractive primaries or secondary colors. So if you have red, blue, and yellow as your primary colors, the 3 colors that are made up of any 2 of the primaries are orange is red and yellow, purple is red and blue, and green is blue and yellow. I tend to work in those colors a lot, especially in my mixing. I don't know what it is. It's whether it's a habit I've fallen into, but it seems to work for me, so I'm not going to question it too much. So what are we doing? We're going to come in and start to get this wet, and I penciled in the original drawing the areas that are lightest. They're the ribs in this vase. So I want to work around those and keep that beautiful light warm color that we spent time putting down. That's how we get that light without having to go back in and paint lights. So we get this base of yellow down everywhere except where those ribs are. And we keep it wet. And then once we have this down, then we can, drop in these other colors while it's still wet. That's my game plan. Already that's starting to take off and look good. I'm going to go around this green leaf and And we can get the ribs, the top of the vase too, because that's going to get darker. We go around that. So we've gone around that green leaf. Yeah, there's just the one leaf that breaks the plane. Keep your eye on the first panel you did. If it's starting to dry out, just throw a little, either a little gold or a little water in. You want to keep that wet. We don't want to lose the shine. We could technically, or not even technically, we could absolutely simply work on one panel or one section of the vase at a time. I try to work in as big a chunks as I can to try and keep my colors looser and my color application have more unity to it. But already, between the shape of this vase with the way the ribs curve around in a spiral kind of fashion, and just putting in this darker gold, it's already starting to look like something. Alright. And in looking at the vase, it's definitely darker. We'll come back to that. Just remember, like I said, keep all this wet. We don't want to get blossoms here. We want to have nice smooth colors later. Okay. Now we can kind of squint at it and say, okay, the base is definitely darker. I'm going to grab some of my purple while it's wet and drop it right in there. And inside of this section, it's also darker. That paint's going to bead up. Just make sure it doesn't run away on you. Maybe strengthen up that purple just a little bit. Get a little bit more in here. And it's still wet, so we can blend that together a little bit. You see, when you mix that with that warm color, it just kind of gets darker and grayed down a little bit. You don't lose necessarily the color. I'm going to pick up what I just soaked up on my brush and throw it right up here. There's a little bit of it here too. Keep this edge wet, keep this edge wet. There's a little bit of purple in here. And as long as all of these sections are wet, we can play with the color in them. I can use a little bit of pink now to also beef this up. If you go inside the rib, just kind of correct yourself. I left them a little wide in the first place so that I could sneak up on them. Here on this side, I overshot. I'm just going to use my paper towel here to grab that, as well as this little bit. Reality is, on this side of it, on the darker side, this rib isn't purely light like the other ones, so we can even darken this one in anyway. This is starting to dry out on me right here. I'm just going to add a little bit more water. All right. That's better. I thought that let me just beef up the light over here. Okay. Yeah, that overhead light was putting glare onto the vase, which we don't want. I can start to mix up a stronger version of the orange, and while this is wet, still put a little bit more in. As I've said to you guys a bunch of times, I absolutely like to sneak up on my colors. And I'm not exactly copying the first painting. Once I get the idea down, I tend to not look too closely. I will look at it for, if I've made a mistake and need to make a correction, I'll definitely do that. But I tend to look at it less and less and start to follow my gut once I've got the roadmap down. And the roadmap is clearly down in good shape here. Just charging up the colors on my palette real quick. I'm going to add a little lavender to my palette too. I may decide to throw that in there. Let's see what happens. So we come down this side. Careful with the purple if you're using it. It's a very strong, usually staining color. We don't want to have it eat up everything. That said, it's great for mixing. You just have to work with it. I'm gonna come back and get some water into this rib and let it soften out. I can always pull out the highlight if I need to. It's more visible up in the top anyway. Okay. Sorry, I'll talk again in a second. I'm just trying to get some more color down. Throw some of that dark where it indents in and runs into that bottom of the base. It definitely darkens up, and it will probably take several passes for me to get everything I want to happen, but we're off to the races in pretty good shape. That top lip of the vase that's dark, we're just going to keep putting the regular color of the vase in there, and then when it comes time to darken it, it'll be totally dry, and we'll just plop that in there. Alright, that's starting to look like something. I'm going to just collect this down here. I don't want it to run away on me. Alright, now we need to work on something that's not contiguous to the vase. There's hard edges on this stuff where the plants reach the edge of the vase, that kind of stuff, but I can start to play with the color for those greens and figure out what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with a little jadeite. I'm going to put a little yellow cadmium into it, and a little bit more jadeite. Put a little bit of pink into it to neutralize it so it's not so greeny green. I could have used burnt sienna too. And I can start to put in some greens that can frame the pinks of the flower. May not have been the best choice. And the reason why I say that is because I could have worked in the flowers and really started to get them going. Now I'm going to have to wait on that. Alright, that's alright. So we'll work on darkening this green shape and stay away from the very, very bottom. I'm adding an extra petal, a leaf here, because I want to definitely encase that part of the flower. And this is definitely not as green or potentially as dark as that's going to get. But it's a good jumping off point. I can always take a little bit of the orange too that I have mixed up from the vase and throw it in. I like to use light colors, so if I've got something on my palette, I'd rather start with that than necessarily running out and mixing a whole new color. That's one of the ways I keep my colors harmonious. In this one, these leaves are flower petals, but I'm actually gonna take the back one, or maybe I did this in the other one too, and I did start to make that green and had to back off, but this back here is green, and I'm using it to push the petal forward. And again, I'm using it also to clarify the shapes of my petals. Right in here, watch that your bead doesn't build up too much and get run into your flower. Let's see. This comes off of here, comes down, and this is right now. This is all one shape because it's going to be a lighter green. And the very first light yellow wash went outside the lines in some cases. I'm still refining and rejiggering the shapes. Those little bits of yellow back there are not a problem. They'll barely be noticeable once we have the painting going. But just like all the other things, I'm working in stages. I don't want to get too dark yet. I want to stay very transparent. And work in as big a shapes within these greens as I can. We'll separate the leaves out later with darks and pulling out highlights. That's no problem at all. Now see here, some of that yellow is shining through the green. That's actually to our advantage, what we made earlier, because it's got more character. There's more depth. There's more stuff going on. And while we've been working on this orange has been getting drier and drier, so by the time I get to here, we should be fine. Let's see. This is a number 12 round. It's a Vlad Yulesiev branded brush made by Rosemary and Company in England. Vlad had them make up a batch of brushes for him, and that's what these are. This little doohickey, that swings, but it swings in front of the flowers, so I'm not going to sweat that right now. This kind of becomes a green stem. There's green back here. I'm going to fill in this shape. And with that wet, I can just drop some green into it. Let it get playful at this point. It's still very light. As long as it's wet and shiny wet, you can absolutely drop some color into these things. We'll probably even throw in I'm going to try and be a little bit more abstract with my green shapes back here. They don't have to be as important. They are useful in their job of pushing and pulling things forward and back. Maybe there's another one here, and that green, that petal will pop forward from there. Yeah, I think that works. Grab a little bit more of my green and yellow mixture. There were a couple of things that I masked out here, here, and here. They just have a little bit of the wall shining through on them. So I wanted to just get that out of the way without having to fuss it too much. So I'm working around my flower petals. This comes in front of that petal, all right. And the orange should be dry enough that we can drop that in. I'm keeping the green underneath the flowers at this point much lighter because I have several stems in there that are going to be a medium light green and not necessarily as dark, and they're going to be warmer too. So I'm going to paint around them to make up that situation. So I'm really starting pretty carefully as I'm putting in the greens in the bottom. And I'm not being a slave to shape at this point. I'm just keeping it on the light side. In between the stemmy things, I can darken up a little bit. We'll come back and adjust that all later. We can come right up to the edge. We can even go right to that lip of the vase if you want and start to put that in. I've got a blossom happening here. Let's try to just, oh, the bead ran down and came in. The best thing we can do is just get this all wet. It's going to be very dark. I'm not worried. Those leaves are going to be very dark later. So if we have that little blossom in there, it's not going to hurt anything. We'll cover that. There's a lot that can happen that you just don't have to worry too much about. You just keep an eye on things as you're moving around your painting. And again, I'm refining my shapes as I go now. There's a little bit of a green that happens to pop out here. Maybe there's another because I don't like that single shape there. Yeah, at this point you can totally still make adjustments to your composition. Looking at it at this point, we're at 28:30. I'm probably going to stop pretty soon. What's going to happen next? I'm sorry, I rolled back to look at it, and he probably couldn't see me. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry, and I'm going to record this for you guys and have it ready for tomorrow morning. In part 3, we're going to finish off here. Okay. So in part 3, we're going to finish off our vase. That needs some more work. Before I do that, though, I will probably come in and finish the shadow. We're going to darken here. We're going to darken a little bit closer to the vase back here. This should be some of the darkest shadow besides this. And that'll give us a chance to drop in some more of that warm so we can really push that glow that we got going on back there. So that's it for now. And I promise not to play with it with the cameras off. We'll come back to this tomorrow, but I will get this part up to you. So tomorrow we finish this. We're going to put the shadow in first. While the shadow is drying, I can start the pinks a little bit and then come back in and focus on the greens after the vase. So tomorrow may be a longer video, but I wanted to get you to this stage, and You can see that I work very very general at first, starting with my biggest, lightest shapes, and even what will be dark later. If I can see it into a mass, I'll paint it light first. And then I start to get more specific. I broke down the vase a little bit. I'm starting to segment out the greens. All of this helps set the stage. And I wanted to have some of this green in here so that when I start putting in the pink, I know how hard I can push this, how dark I can make this and still have it look realistic. Not trying to be too super specific. I like these stems that are much warmer and lighter, and you just start to carve stuff out as you look at it. Haven't focused on these yet, so there's plenty to go, but we'll definitely do some more on it tomorrow. Hope you're enjoying the painting, and I'll see you on the other side.